is a Mary is a central figure um, in the two gospel accounts of the birth of Jesus, and she has become an important focus of Christian theology and piety. And although she has some prominence in the history of Christianity, great prominence in the history of Christianity, she is actually seldom the amount of what we hear about Mary. You will think that she'll be more prominent in the books in the New Testament, but really and truly, she isn't. She is seldom mentioned outside of the birth narratives of Jesus, and also mentioned briefly at the crucifixion. Um, she is not named at all in any of Paul's letters in the New Testament, and her name only appears once. She only appears once in the book of Acts. And if you really get into the nitty gritty of the Gospels, John never gives her name in the Gospels, and in Mark's Gospel, her name is only mentioned once. Um, it is really in Matthew and Luke's Gospels that you really hear about Mary, um, and Luke a little bit more than Matthew. Um, so really, the strong impression of the character and strength of Mary comes basically in those two Gospels, Matthew and Luke. Um, she's first introduced in the scripture as a young virgin. She's betrothed or engaged, and engagement in those days was different to now. I mean, engagement today, you can be engaged and break it off, and it's like if it was, your boyfriend and your girlfriend. In those days, engagement was a little bit more serious than that. It was like a marriage, actually. That in such a way you could even call your fiance your wife. And what happened is that they legally were committed to marry, but were not living together, or they were not having sexual intimacy either. And it was so much so that if even, if although you were betrothed, if you were found unfaithful, you would have been stoned to death. And so we heard of Mary being engaged to Joseph, and Joseph is a descendant of Abraham and David. Um, we're not told how old she was, but we know that she was a teenager, and um, that nothing is said of her ancestry, except for the fact that she was a relative of Elizabeth, who is the mother of John the Baptizer, and who obviously then was a cousin of Jesus, or a relation of Jesus. Um, One other thing I should have added about yes, Pam. Again, unmute.
How can they say that Jesus was the house of David if they don't know what Mary's history was?
Yeah, and that is the thing, because really and truly, it is Joseph that is from the house of David.
Right.
And you will read that in Matthew's Gospel in the first chapter, where it gives you the genealogy, and it shows you that he comes from David's line. Um, um, so technically speaking, it is not. He's not a Jesus would not have been a biological descendant of David. Um,
Unless
um,
Mary was.
but unless Mary was, and the only thing they tell us is that Joseph is, and he was married to Mary. So by extension, you know, but
I mean, traditionally, the Jewish people um,
the
are
line is the woman.
matrilineal.
Yes,
They don't, because I mean, let's be honest, the father could be anybody, right?
correct.
But you
But
know
if
who the
you
mother is.
But you see, at the same time, if you look at Matthew chapter 1, the whole lineage is all men, or
Right.
virtually all men. And it has nothing to do with the women at all, except maybe if the woman was, like it mentions there that Joseph was married to Mary. And that's how Mary's name is mentioned in the lineage.
Sure.
But yeah. But you know, as I said, and I mean, you're talking about the other part of it is that David is seen as probably, if not the best king that they ever had. And so um, it I mean, I don't even know how to put this, but obviously, well, not obviously, but it appears that since he would have obeyed God most of the time. And but well, I mean, he didn't obey him all the time, but at least the good thing about David is that David was a man who was very much willing to ask God's forgiveness, which a lot of the other kings did not. And that separates him, although he was not a perfect man, and he couldn't be a perfect man. The fact that he was not a perfect man, at least he knew that once he asked God's forgiveness, that and was contrite about it, he will be forgiven, and so he was. Um,
So
so
I'd like to share something about Mary that when we
mhm,
went to Israel, our tour
mhm,
guide told us, so I don't know, I didn't look it up to see if it's truth or not, but that Mary
mhm.
lived on a kibbutz until she was 12 or 14 years old.
Live on to what?
What's it called? Kibbutz? On a communal living, kabish? What's it called?
Kabish?
You know,
I'm not okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Though.
it's a communal living Jewish community. It's very
Mm-hmm.
kabish. I'm saying it wrong. Kibbutz. Kibbutz. Never
I
mind.
think it is.
Anyway, so
Okay.
that's a communal living community. So they
Mm-hmm.
all share all the duties and they all live together. And that's where she lived for the first 12 years of her life. Now, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's true or not. And that I don't, yeah.
Yeah, and she
A lot of,
is.
I think at that time, that's how they lived anyway in communal
The
living.
only other information we know about Mary, that well, I mean, there's more,
Kibbutz.
but I mean, but there's information about Mary where Mary's parents were Anne, and Joachim.
Oh,
Um, 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 those were the parents of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Um, and so, for lack of a better terminology, those were Jesus's grandparents. Um, but in terms of the Bible itself, there's not that whole lot of information about her. But I cannot remember. I don't even know. I was looking to see if I got home after I got home here, if I have that book here, and I might not. I don't know if I have it in the office or where I have it, but there's a book called The Forgotten Books of the Bible, and and um and I mean, all the books that have been written are not written in this canon, so yeah. Um, One of the other points I should have mentioned about a betrothal is that the period used to be for a year. And you can tell that the angel Gabriel came to Mary during that time, during that year that she was betrothed to Joseph. And and obviously Gabriel greeted her. Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you. And obviously, or apparently, Mary was frightened by the visit, so much so that Gabriel had to tell her, "Do not be afraid, for you have found favor with God." Excuse me. And the angel tells her that she's going to be pregnant. She's going to bear a son. His name is to be Jesus, and I think he also mentions during that conversation that he will be from the house of David. And poor Mary was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm a virgin. I'm not really technically had any intimacy with this gentleman, so how could I be bearing a child? And when she was told by the angel that the old Holy Spirit will come upon her, and the power of the Most High would overshadow her, and the child will be called Holy, the Son of the Most High, and so forth and so forth. And what we find Mary doing is that she's obedient. She becomes the handmaid of the Lord, and she said, "Let it be to me according to your will." And Luke's Gospel, chapter 1, tells us that. Obviously, I mean, as a little girl, she probably be still wondering, well, how is this all going to take place? But at the same time, she did not doubt Gabriel. Um, she believed that what he said was going to happen, which was quite different if you read a story about Zachariah and Elizabeth when they were having John the Baptist. The Gabriel appeared to them as well, but instead of, well, appeared to Zachariah, did not appear to Mary in this instance. He appeared to Zachariah in the temple and told him that, you know, his wife and him were going to have a child, and he was to be named John. And Zachariah was, is like, hey, you're kidding. I'm an old man. And he's very diplomatic. He didn't call his wife an old woman. He said she's well on in age.
Whatever that means.
Or well on in years. He didn't call her old, but he called himself an old man, and that she was well on in age. And so how can this be? And his punishment for doubting God was he was made dumb. He could not speak for the whole duration of the pregnancy. He was only able to speak again after the baby was born, and they asked her what the child's name, or asked them what the child's name was, and they had to bring probably a tablet to him, and he wrote his name is John. And from the time he wrote that on, he was able to speak again. And even so much so that some of the family members wanted to know, well, there's nobody in the family named John. Why John? Why the name John? But that's what the angel told him he was to be named, and that was what he was named. And you would find too that when Mary gets her news about being pregnant, she also got the news from Gabriel that her older relative Elizabeth was also pregnant, and that she was 6 months on in her pregnancy. And so here was this woman who had lived a long life of childlessness, is now bearing a child. And so Mary decides to go and visit Elizabeth, the elderly Elizabeth, and her husband. And when she greeted her, John the Baptizer, in the womb of his mother, leaped for joy when he heard the mother of Jesus speak. And also Elizabeth is exuberantly expressing a loud voice how blessed she was to be in the presence of Mary and the child she would bear. Hence comes the prayer that is usually said, Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. This is what Elizabeth said to Mary when she arrived at her home. And then you will find too that Mary responds to Elizabeth's salutation with a song of praise and adoration, which is called the Magnificat, which we all know, or is called the Song of Mary. And you will find that parts of it reflects Hannah's song of praise after her son Samuel was born as well. And then it is believed that Mary may have stayed with Elizabeth for maybe up to the time of her birth, and maybe even to the circumcision of John, because he would have been circumcised 8 days after he was born. That is when the Jews circumcised, and also you're given your name. So you will find that the church, we don't talk much now about the circumcision as we used to. We call it now the Holy Name. But that was the day on which the church celebrates on New Year's Day on January 1st, which is the Holy Name, and it's also the circumcision. And so it is believed that Mary hung around until Elizabeth bore John, and probably too he was circumcised. Now, I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us this, but when Mary would have gotten back home, she was faced with the possibility of Joseph divorcing her. I mean, again, as I said, betrothal engagement in those days was different to now. If you wanted to end a relationship, you had to go through divorce. And we are told that he did not, Joseph didn't, was ready to divorce her. He did not want to expose her to public shame and punishment, as if she was an adulteress. And so he was willing to just quietly put her away by divorce. However, an angel appeared to him in a dream and assured him that the child was conceived by the Holy Spirit, that it will save his people from their sins. And so Joseph took Mary home as his wife, and he had no sexual relationships with her before Jesus was born. Um, and so that is how, and it tells you something about the man Joseph himself, that he could respond in this kind of way to Mary. But obviously, you can tell he would have had to be a God-fearing man as well, to follow the leadings of the angel. And then you will find that the whole birth, the pregnancy and the birth of Jesus would have had its peaks and valleys, as far as Mary is concerned. Not only was she faced with the threat of a divorce from Joseph, which she didn't have to go through, but then during the ending part of her pregnancy, they were faced with a census where they were ordered by Augustus, Caesar Augustus, to travel to Bethlehem, to be a part of the census. And so Mary and Joseph had to register in Bethlehem, and because that's where um, Joseph belonged, to the house of David. And we find that they came, and everyone was coming um, for the census. So you can imagine crowds of people gathering. As I said to the others this morning, all the hotels were filled, all the Airbnbs were filled, all the bread and breakfasts were filled. Um, and and so and if you even could stay at somebody in a room, they were also filled. And what you had was then a stable in which Jesus was born. That's all the innkeeper could give her, to have her child. The other good thing that we don't even realize is that it would probably be apparent that Joseph had, if we were to think of it in its natural, literal sense, that Joseph would have had to deliver this child. Again, we didn't hear about any midwives were there or anything of the sort, and so he probably would have had to deliver this child, again, telling you the kind of man that he is, or he was. So Jesus was born in a humble place. Um, um, and the course of the events then that takes place tells you a whole lot, about Jesus and about Mary and Joseph, because after they take the long trip to Bethlehem and the baby is born, they find nowhere to stay, and they stayed in a stable where animals were kept. The baby was born, and then the first set of visitors were the shepherds, and they came to the stable because they had heard the angelic song of glory to God in the highest, and they were told that the Messiah was born. Then we find that, as I said earlier, after 8 days, Mary and Joseph would have traveled into Jerusalem to have Jesus circumcised on the 8th day after his birth, um, and to have him named, which was the normal thing that they would do. Now, the other thing that would have taken place was that you have the what would have been called the presentation or the purification of Jesus, and that would have taken place. And the purification, after a woman had a child, she needed to be purified, and it was used to be called a purification, and then also the presenting Jesus in the temple, where they would have met Simeon the priest and Anna the prophetess. the mitzvahs which, Lord, now let us thou thy servant depart in peace, which came from Simeon after seeing Jesus. He was promised that he will see him before he died, and so he did. Um, the other part of it, which I should mention too, is the wise men came, and the wise men did not come to Jesus at the stable. If you read Matthew's gospel, it tells you, I don't remember, I think it's chapter 2. If you read Matthew's gospel, it tells you that the wise men came to a house. So obviously the Holy Family had already moved from the stable and was in a house when the wise men brought their gifts to Jesus. And while they were coming there, yes, Dorothy.
My Bible says that Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them.
That's what I was getting to now.
Oh,
yes,
I'm sorry. I'm ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. That's no problem. That's not a problem.
Okay. Continue.
No,
then.
that's
Carry
not a
on.
problem. That's not a problem. Yeah, I was just going to say, and
Okay, go
as
ahead.
you know, when the wise men were coming when they were coming to Jesus, they couldn't find their way, and they went to Herod. And they told Herod that, they saw a star, and the star that they saw is the star of a king that is born. And that really intrigued Herod, because he was the king, and how could there be another king being born? And obviously he saw him as a threat. And so what happened is that Herod then told them, well, when you find him, come back and let me know so I can pay him homage. And they went, they found Jesus, they gave him their gifts, but an angel told them, you need to go another way. Do not go back to Herod. And so they do not go back to Herod. And therefore then when Herod realized he was tricked, that they did not return, then he decided that he will, sad to say, kill all the little babies that were 2 years old and under. And where we have, we talk about the holy innocents. And so, and meanwhile, while he was doing that, the angel had also said to Joseph, you need to take your family to Egypt. And they escaped to Egypt instead of going back home, and will stay there until Herod had died. And the danger had passed. So when you look, and then when they left Egypt, that's when they went then to Nazareth and settled in and lived in Nazareth as a family. And so you could see all the ups and downs and the hills and the valleys of the whole process and journey surrounding the early days of Jesus, which we have in the Bible. And there was so much, it was so much for Mary, that Mary kept all these things and pondered them. Luke tells us that she kept all these things and she pondered them in her heart, because obviously, having been told what kind of a kid she was going to have, and then seeing all that was taking place, she couldn't help but wondering, what is this? What is this all about? Now, we don't hear anything about Mary again until when Jesus is 12 years old, and they go to the Passover festival in Jerusalem. And then after it was over and they left and they had traveled for a day, and then they were like, hey, Joseph, did you see Jesus anywhere around here? And and they're, asking auntie this and uncle this and cousin this and the neighbor this, and to find out where's Jesus. And they realize there's no Jesus. He's not with the other kids, he's not with anyone. And then they had to travel back to Jerusalem, where they found him in the temple with the learned teachers, and he was having a conversation with them about the scriptures. I'm sure they were teaching him, and he was teaching them. And at 12 years old, and when when Mary saw them, she expressed her worry at having his father's worry, and her worry at not knowing where he was. Someone said this morning, if my mother had seen me, they would have taken me aside and smacked me, which is, I'm sure Mary probably felt like doing. Um, but and you start to see who Jesus was going to be, because he says to his mother, why are you worried? Don't you know that I would have been about my father's business? I would have been in my father's house about my father's business, and that's where he was. Um, so that's why we see Mary once again. Now, we see Mary again when Jesus is performing his first miracle of turning water into wine, and Mary is at the wedding with Jesus, and they ran out of wine. And Mary came up to her son, like a nice mother will say to her son. And obviously, by then, she knew the powers that he had. Although we are not sure how she knew that, the Bible doesn't tell us that. She knew that he was an extraordinary person that could do extraordinary things. And so she said to him, they've run out of wine. You need to get some more wine for the couple, so that they won't be embarrassed. And so Jesus gives her this curt response about his hour has not yet come. So why are you asking me to do this when I am not supposed to be doing this yet? And it typical, and you could tell that Mary was a strong woman. She wasn't no weakling. She was a strong woman, and you can tell that she says to, when the servants come, it's almost like she says, "Oh, forget about what he said. Just do what he says." She tells them, "He's gonna do what I tell him," and he and just tell and she says to him, "Whatever he tells you to do, you just do," and he does. He tells them, bring the jars of water, 12 of them, and so forth and so forth. And they change into wine, the best wine that the wedding ever had. So much so that those who tasted it said, you usually leave the best wine. You usually have the best wine first, but now you've left the best wine for the last, which is unusual. The best wine is normally first. So you see here, Mary at the wedding in Cana, where she asserts herself as his mother, and he was obedient to her. Although he gave her a little flip first, but he was obedient to her. Um, 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 but one of the things when I should add here that when he says that my time has not yet come, obviously in his own mind, probably his ministry had its own timetable when these things were to happen, and she was asking him to do it before the time, but not that he could not do it. The other time you see Mary again is in that story in Matthew's gospel, where I think it's Matthew chapter 13, where it is mentioned that Mary, his mother, and his brothers and sisters are outside waiting to see him. And it was a situation where people have apparently went and told Mary, you better come and get a hold of your son and knock some sense into his head, because he's doing some stuff here that we don't understand. And she comes probably to say, Jesus, let's go home, or what have you. And he was with his disciples, and they were all sitting and all together, I should say sitting, but all gathered together. And when they came and told him, "Oh, your mother and your brothers and your sisters are outside," Jesus made the comment that, my mothers and my sisters are, and my brothers are those who do the will of the Father, and not necessarily just my biological siblings. It is more of those who are my spiritual brothers and sisters that are even more important than the biological. Which again reminds us why the church family is so important, because and that's why we call ourselves brothers and sisters as well, and that is more important. Um, not and Jesus is not saying that we're to throw away our biological siblings, of course not. Um, but what he's saying is, don't treat those who are around you, who use your spiritual family, as if they are not family, because in God's eyes, they are family and they are important in your life. I'm trying to think if there was any other parts that I've forgotten about. Um, uh, Now, and then the other part that you find Jesus's mother is at the crucifixion. She is there when he's on the cross. And we know one of the last words of Jesus was, "Woman, behold thy son." And then he turns to the beloved disciple and said, "Behold your mother." And from that day, John takes her to his home. Um, um, so and cared for her there. So you see Jesus's mother is mentioned in the crucifixion, where um, um, well, she's there in the crucifixion with her son and seeing all that is taking place. Um, It is also mentioned, I think, I don't remember which passage, which book, but Mary apparently remains in Jerusalem, and she was a part of the disciples um, in the upper room when Jesus appears after the resurrection. That she was apparently there. There's another aspect where I cannot remember where I saw that, but that she might have been a part of the 120 disciples as well, who would have received when the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost. Um, so that is also a possibility there, that she was there. There's nothing in the New Testament that speaks about her death or what happened to her later in life. And that's where you get into other details concerning Mary that are not mentioned in the Bible, where it is believed that um, she bodily assumed, or they call it the Assumption of Mary, um, that she was translated into heaven without death, similarly to how Elijah was translated into heaven without death. There's also the belief that is not mentioned in the Bible that she was conceived without original sin, that she was born free from original sin. You've heard the terms of the Immaculate Conception. Um, um, and the Roman Church believes that. And the Roman Church also believes the whole notion of the Assumption of Mary. The other thing is that there has always been, scholars have always have conflict over whether or not Jesus was Mary's only child. Um, as you know, Luke's gospel refers to Jesus as the firstborn son, as if to say there were others that followed. Um, and there is also in Matthew's gospel, as I mentioned earlier, the whole notion of brothers being listed. James of Jerusalem, who was the head of the church, the Jerusalem church, is always called the brother of our Lord. There is mention of sisters in that passage from Matthew's gospel as well. Um, but the notion is that some felt that Mary may have had more children. Others believe that these children that they were referring to were really Joseph's children from another marriage, and that they were not Mary's own, that Mary only had Jesus, which is why she is always referred to as the ever blessed Virgin. Um, um, and so that is still, I know the Roman Church believes that she had no more children. But there's always that jiggle as to whether or not she had more children or not. Are we to take the passages that quote brothers and sisters as literally brothers, biological brothers or sisters, or who knows, were they spiritual brothers and sisters, or were they his stepbrothers and stepsisters? There's a cloud surrounding that as far as Christianity, the Christian religion is concerned, where some believe one thing, some believe another. Let me see if there's anything else that I want to say about Mary. Let's see. As you also know that there's the other part I wanted to mention about Mary is that there is a doctrine concerning Mary which had developed back in the 5th century, whether or not Mary was the mother of Christ or she was the mother of God. And the Patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, said that she was the mother of Christ, whereas Cyril, the Patriarch of Alexandria, said she was the mother of God. And coming out of the Council of Ephesus, which was in, I think, 430 something AD, Mary became officially affirmed as Mother of God. So she is referred to in pretty much all Christian, I don't know if I could say all, but in predominantly Christian circles as the Mother of God, since Jesus is also God. And so she is seen as the Mother of God. Yes, Marilyn.
Luke 1, verse 35.
Mm-hmm.
The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." Why then do we say the Son of Man?
Because he's also fully human. Because he's also fully human. And what you're reading from, I know in some translations it says Son of the Most High, but we have to remember that Jesus was both fully God and fully human. If he wasn't fully human, then he would not be able to we would not he, but we would not have felt that he knows how it feels to be like us. And so so when they use the terminology Son of Man there, it is usually from a human point of view. Yes, Pam.
Jesus also used the term Son of God? I mean, Son of Man?
Yes, I think he did. I think he did. I stand on the correction, but I cannot remember. I cannot remember if he did or not. But I know, but look it up. Son of Man was used more than it was used. What you quoted just now from Luke, right?
Luke.
Yes, Luke. Let's see.
According to co.org, whoever that is, the Son of Man is used by Jesus 80 times.
Yeah, he used it.
32
well,
times
80 times. I didn't think he used it that much. I didn't think he used it that much, but
I'm just reading.
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's fine.
32 times in Matthew, 14 times in Mark, 26 times in Luke,
Okay.
and 10 times in a qualitatively different way from the synoptic gospels in John.
Oh, so John Wesley refers to him more as Son of God, probably then.
I'll look that up next.
Yeah, John must he referred to him more as Son of God. Where were you? What verse were you reading just now, Marilyn?
35.
Hmm?
Luke 1:35.
Luke 1:35. Yeah, yours says Son of God. Some translations, my translations say Son of the Most High.
And Luke 4:41 and Mark 3:11. The demons fall down and declare you are the Son of God, according to what I'm reading.
Well, remember, I think the devil, when there was the temptations in the wilderness, referred to him as the Son of God. If you're the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. I think the Satan had asked him, had told him that as well, had referred to him as the Son of God. So at least he felt, or at least had some knowledge that he could be the Son of God. The devil, that is. Did they mention where like in Matthew, where the Son of Man is mentioned? Did they give any verses, Pam?
I'll go back to that. You wanted to know about Matthew?
If there were any citations, any citing of,
7:43.
say that again, please, Marilyn.
Matthew 27:43.
Matthew 27:43.
He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. Before he said, I am the Son of God.
No, I was talking about the Son of Man.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was talking about the Son of Man. Yes, that was when they were taunting him and saying that he called himself the Son of God.
Matthew 26:24.
Okay, let me see.
Or Matthew 24:30. Matthew 12:8.
Son of Man will go just as it is written.
Matthew 12:8.
The story of trials.
Matthew 9:6 is probably a good
Mhm.
quote, but I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the paralyzed man, get up and take your mat and go home.
You said that's Matthew 9?
That was Matthew 29:2.
Oh, 29. 29?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Because I
That
know
was a
Matthew
brain-
ain't got
that was a brain-
Matthew ain't got no 29 chapters.
That was a brain freeze. That was Ezekiel. Matthew 9:6.
Oh, Matthew 9:6. Because I'm like 29? No. Matthew finishes at 28. That's like Acts, you know? Matthew 9:6.
4:30 as well.
Matthew 9. So That you may know that the Son of God is authority
Mhm.
to forgive sins.
Let me just check something here. Oopsie, 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 oopsie. Yeah, yeah, that's what I figured. Being called the Son of Man because both that he was human as we are. Um, so yeah.
Matthew 12:8 and Mark 2:28 also
Yeah.
say that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he uses it a lot. But he uses both. He uses Son of God and he uses Son of Man. But for us to understand that God was, although
Is to
Jesus,
proclaim his humanness.
yes, it
It's
just a
to
matter
proclaim his
of
humanness.
showing his humanness, as I said earlier, and so that we can, and our understanding that he truly shares and knows and feels like who we are as human beings. All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything about Mary I've left out. I think I've covered, if not everything about her, well, the most important parts of her. Yeah. Any questions on the mother of our Lord?
No, but I do have a statement.
Go
As a
ahead.
midwife, there is some theories that Mary did have a midwife in the manger who helped deliver Jesus, and her name was Salome, Salome,
Salome.
Salome, right? I know.
Um,
Not in the
well,
Bible. She's
that's
listed.
in the
They're also
Bible.
listed
Well,
in
Salome is
Exodus.
one of the women. Salome is one of the women who was believed to be who was at the cross, at the
Who?
crucifixion.
Oh,
Salome is a woman who was at the crucifixion. Um, there is even some belief that she may have been of some relation to Mary, but
no
um,
evidence.
I'm not sure if there's evidence to
Nothing
show to
written.
prove
I
that.
know. I have to
Yeah,
go. I googled it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But Salome is said to be one of the women who were at the cross watching Jesus crucified. I don't remember which gospel reading that is in. Let me see if I could find which gospel reading that is in.
In Luke.
Now I don't remember which one, but I'll have to, let's see if we can find. Well, I'm looking at Matthew. Somebody looks at Mark, and nobody looks at Luke, and another look at John. And so one of us have to come up with it, I think. Bum, 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 bum.
That's the first.
Well, it doesn't look like it's not Matthew. Matthew mentions Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So Salome was not there. Let's see what Mark says. Mark says.
Mark has Salome in 1540 and 16:1.
Mark does?
Mark does,
Yes, here it is. Right. Some women were watching for this. Some of them, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. Yes. And you said in 15.
And 16:1.
Oh, 16:1. Right. Because she was one of the women who went to the tomb in Mark's gospel. Correct.
Right.
Correct. She was one of the women that went to the tomb in Mark's gospel. So she would have been mentioned there. Yeah, but again, we are unsure. So the name Salome is there, Dorothy. I think that's the only gospel that records her name in it. I don't think any others did. Yes, Marilyn.
Not to be confused with the daughter of Herod that wanted the head of John the Baptist.
Yes,
Oh.
true.
And I
All
did
right.
get a text from George saying he can hear and see our study.
Oh,
Okay.
but we can't hear or see him. We're glad you're hearing us, George. We're glad you're here. All right, let's move on now to Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, or sometimes called Joseph, and the wife of Cleopas. Now, she is sometimes also referred to in the scriptures as the other Mary. If you read Matthew chapter 27, and in chapter 28, let me see, Matthew, let's look at Matthew chapter 28. In Matthew chapter 28. You see, after the Sabbath, at the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb, went to look at the tomb, and it is the other Mary is Mary, the wife of Cleopas and the mother of James and Joseph. She was one of the women who followed Jesus from Galilee and who ministered to him. We know that in Matthew chapter 27 and verse 55. And she was probably one of those who provided financial support for his ministry, because she was no doubt among the group who accompanied Jesus on his last journey to Jerusalem. She witnessed his death, as I said. She was near the cross with his mother and with Mary Magdalene. And also after his death, she was at the tomb for burial. And in order to ensure that his body will be properly anointed with spices, you read just now in Matthew chapter 28 and verse 1 that she was one of two women, the other being Mary Magdalene, who went to the tomb on the day after the Sabbath only to find it empty. Now, and one of the things we have to understand is that when we read the Gospels, they all give you different numbers of women that went to the tomb. The only person that we know for sure that went to the tomb is Mary Magdalene. In fact, one of the Gospels tell you only Mary Magdalene went. Others will tell you there were other women that went, but Mary Magdalene is mentioned in all four Gospels as going. And we will talk. And I will probably repeat that again when I get to her. So this Mary, the other Mary, is seen as one of those as well, according to Matthew's gospel, is seen as one of the first two women to witness the resurrection. So that is Mary, the mother of James, and he would have been. Have anyone ever heard about James the Less? Here we call him James the Younger, but if you've ever heard, some churches are named or dedicated to James the Less, that will be the mother. That's the Mary who's the mother of James the Less and Joseph. Any questions on her? All right, let's go to Mary of Bethany, who is the sister of Martha and Lazarus, and they are featured in basically three stories in the Gospels. You find or at least 3 stories, I will say. You find on one occasion when Jesus was invited to dinner at Martha's house, you know, Martha was cleaning, getting everything spotless for Jesus, while Mary was apparently shirking from her duties in the kitchen and decided that she was going to sit at Jesus's feet and listen to him, what he was teaching. And then we find Martha comes and she complains about her sister not helping. And Jesus just gently chastised her and said, Martha, Mary has chosen the good part, which should not be taken away from her. And you find that in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, that story of Mary and Martha, and Mary taking the time to listen to what Jesus had to say, while Martha was busily preparing for was busily preparing for Jesus's presence. Yes, Marlene.
I have heard it
Huh.
preached that this story is the one that validates women in their being
Mm-hmm.
a disciple, or their being
Mm-hmm.
valid people versus being chattel.
Yes. And for me, what it does, I think there are many other stories in the Bible that do
I didn't
that.
say it was the only one.
Yeah, yeah. But for me, what it does is that you may have heard it said, this person is a Mary, this person is a Martha. That Martha is the doer, and Mary is the beer. She's more into the being, whereas Martha is into the doing. And so and you have both types in the church, and you have people who are a bit of both as well. So these two sisters are normally compared in that way, as the doer and one in doing and one in being. Then mind you, I will hasten to say that Jesus did not criticize Martha for what she was doing, um, but at the same time as well, she did not wish Mary to be taken away from what she was doing either. So we need to realize that and to understand that. But yes, you could see it in the way that you're also saying it, Marilyn. Very true. Very, very true. And then next time you see them or you hear about them is when Lazarus was dead. They had sent word to Jesus that he was ill. You know that Martha and Mary and Lazarus were loved by Jesus. It means Jesus loved everybody, but they were close friends of Jesus, and they would often open their home to him whenever he was traveling through Bethany. And so while he was across the Jordan, Jesus received word from the sisters that Lazarus was ill. And instead of going straight to him, he deliberately doesn't go at that time. Um, um, uh, and he tells his disciples that it was not an illness unto death, but that it was for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by means of it. And John's Gospel tells us this in chapter 11. And so Jesus remains for 2 days, and then he leaves for Bethany. And obviously, he already knew he had died, because Jesus tells his disciples that our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, and I am going now to go wake him out of his sleep. And so obviously, Jesus is Jesus. And so he apparently knew that he had died, or in what would be called, he died. And so that even that when the disciples even said to him, oh no, don't worry. They were confident that Lazarus would recover. And Jesus, in that passage, in the same chapter 11, he says, he then bluntly tells them, listen, fellas, I meant that the man is dead. He's of the, he meant the sleep of death. And he had to let them know this. But by the time Jesus got there, Lazarus had died 4 days, and he was in the tomb. So obviously, you know what happens. You know, as I used to hear a lot when I lived in Illinois, when family come to stay with you, they're like fish. After 3 days,
Ah.
I learned that in Illinois. Oh, I learned that. People there did not want family spending more than 3 days. They did not. When our family came and spent weeks and couple of months, they were like, "Are you serious?" They did not like that. They said not that they didn't like that. They could not deal with that. They could not deal with that. So that's where I learned that phrase back in Illinois, because we never said it in Barbados. We used to be happy to see family. The longer the merrier. But so when Jesus turns up and people are crying, and the first person who goes out to him was Martha. Martha greets him, and then but Mary stays at home, and it is and it is a little bit of a strange, different contrast here, because when we get to the Luke's gospel, Mary is the one who's more into Jesus. Martha is the one who's more into doing stuff. And then we come here now in this passage in John, and you find that Mary is more into following Jesus's actions, while Mary seems to be withdrawn and not coming out to meet him at first. But again, it tells you the whole notion of the two sisters. One is more contemplative, the other one is more, we could probably say impulsive, if that's the right terminology to do. What do you say, Pam?
Action-oriented.
Oh, action-oriented. Thank you, Pam. The other one is more action-oriented. Well, so that was the opposite of action.
Well, contemplative. I was.
Okay, all right.
I
was going to find
I
another
was
word.
riffing off of contemplative.
Contemplative oriented. So, and you know, and Mary doesn't go out to him until Martha comes back to the house and tells her, you know, Jesus is asking for you. He's calling for you. And that's when she goes out and she repeats the same words that her sister had already said. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus sees her weeping and everybody around him weeping, and then he also weeps. And despite of Martha's fear of the order of this man, Jesus calls out with a loud voice for Lazarus to come out from the tomb, and out came the man from the tomb. And so we have that story there about Mary and Martha and Lazarus there. And then the third story we know about them again. Jesus was at their home. They were serving a meal. This is in John chapter 12. Jesus was at their home. He was serving a meal, and they were serving a meal. And this time Lazarus is resurrected, and he's sitting at the table. And while Martha, again, the action-oriented one, she was serving. What does Mary do? She takes a pound of ointment, costly ointment. It was an extravagant amount of expensive perfume, and she anointed Jesus's feet, and she wiped his feet with her hair. And during this time, or our friend Judas Iscariot was present, and he rebuked Mary for wasting all of that ointment, saying that it should be sold and the proceeds given to the poor. But obviously, that Judas ain't interested in the poor. That was just a ploy. But Jesus rebukes him, and he says to her, "Let her alone. Let her keep it for the day of my burial. The poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me with you." And so we see here Mary and Martha and Lazarus mentioned again. There's also some in Matthew and Mark's gospel that speaks about Jesus being anointed shortly before his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But neither of them give the name of the woman who anointed him. Could have been her. We don't know. We do not know. Any questions on Mary of Bethany? All right, let's go to Mary, the mother of Mark. This Mary, was apparently a widow. She owned a house, and she was pretty much a wealthy widow. And it appears that she had a large home, because her home was one of the church homes where the early Christians used to meet to have fellowship and church. And so her house is an example of what a home was serving as a church was like. If we remember, when Peter was in jail and the jail was open and he was able to leave his miraculous release from prison, and he went to a house. And when he got to the house, there was a servant girl who heard his voice and ran back and told everybody, "Peter is outside." And they were like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me." And lo and behold, yes, it was Peter. Now it was this Mary's home that they were there praying for Peter's release and safety and release. At the home of Mary. Now this Mary's son was named John, also named Mark. Acts chapter 12 tells us this. He was a companion of Paul, and this Mary's nephew, strangely enough, was Barnabas, who we hear about in the Acts of the Apostles. And we know the situation between John Mark and Paul and Barnabas when they all used to go on mission. And then there was, and Paul and Barnabas had an argument over Mark, and they split and went their separate ways. And this Mark that we're talking about, whose mother is Mary, and he is the author of the Gospel of Mark. This Mary's son is the author of the Gospel of Mark. Now, we are not for sure. I'm saying this, but the Bible doesn't say this. But there's some tradition. Some believe that the home where the Last Supper took place was in this Mary's home. We do not know that for a fact, but it is believed to be, and it is also believed to be the home where the apostles and a group of women met and prayed after Jesus had ascended into heaven. So that is where we believe that this woman was pretty wealthy. She had a pretty big home that she could entertain all of these folks, and they can pray and have church and break bread and all of that there. Any questions on Mary, the mother of John Mark? All right, now let's turn to Mary Magdalene. Now, you know, as Jesus and the disciples, once as they travel from place to place, there were these women who followed and supported them wherever they went. And one of these women was Mary Magdalene. She accompanied Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem. And she is named in all four Gospels, as I earlier said, as a witness to his crucifixion, his burial, his resurrection. Obviously, she knew where they buried him. That's why she was going on Easter morning to put spice on his body, embalm his body more. And she was a major witness. Now she came. The reason why she's called Mary Magdalene is because she came from a place called Magdala, and so that's the way the name Magdalene came. It was a town located on the Sea of Galilee, just north of Tiberias. Um, and and she is mentioned in Luke's gospel as being the one from whom 7 demons had been cast out, had been gone out. So she was at one point in time demon possessed. It is believed that she had some wealth, and was able to provide for Jesus and for the 12 apostles out of their resources. I just want to double check something there before I give you the quote. Let me see. Yes, if you read chapter 8 verses, Luke chapter 8 verses 1 to 3, it tells you in verse 3, these women were helping to support them out of their own means. And you will see the name Mary Magdalene, Mary called Magdalene, is also mentioned among those women. So it would appear that she was a woman of some wealth and was helping to support Jesus's ministry as he went from place to place, and the ministry of the disciples as well. Now, many people have felt that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, which for me, there's no truth in that. She has been. There was a passage. Let me see. In fact, just before that. Hold on. Let's see. Luke chapter 7 and verse 37. Or if you start from verse 36, you hear in Luke chapter 7, when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. And as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. And then it goes on and on and on. But people have acquainted her to be Mary Magdalene, and there's no truth in that. Luke doesn't give her name, and you find, as we mentioned there just now in chapter 8, he mentions Mary Magdalene's name as being one from whom demons were cast out. He did not mention that she was the woman in the city or that she was a sinful woman, but just as the one whom 7 demons had been cast out. So, and it will be, it is more plausible to think of her as since it's mentioned that she was a person of means, and as a companion, and that she was even probably a woman of some kind of a higher social status, and not as a prostitute that has said that she's said to have been. Um, um, She stood by Jesus as he was dying on the cross. As I said, she saw him buried. She came to the empty tomb on the third day. And because of the other names of the other women vary, she is considered as the primary witness to those events, since Mary Magdalene name is mentioned in all of them. The various Gospels, when it comes to the resurrection story, gives you some details about the resurrection story. John's Gospel gives the most detail about the resurrection story and the conversation between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. When she was at the tomb, she was at the tomb weeping, and she recognizes, she thought that Jesus was the gardener. And in John's Gospel, that's the only time it's mentioned that she thought he was the gardener. And when he called her by name, she recognizes who he is, and she calls him Rabboni, meaning teacher. And she went to touch him, and he says, "Don't touch me." He tells her to go and tell the others what is happening. And so she becomes the first to announce to the waiting disciples that she had seen the Lord. That is according to John's Gospel. The other Gospels does not give you as much of an in-depth story. It tells you that she went to the tomb with other ladies, and when they got there, the stone was rolled away, and there was someone, an angel or someone who was dressed in white robe, saying, "He's not here, he is risen." But the conversation between Mary Magdalene and Jesus takes place more in depth in John's Gospel. Any questions about Mary Magdalene? And then the last Mary, the sixth Mary, there's really nothing much to say about her. She occurs in Romans chapter 16 and verse 6. We don't know who she is, except that she was a Roman Christian. And Paul mentions her in his greetings when he was given his list of greetings. In chapter 16, he starts off with a whole list of greetings, and he mentions this Mary, whom he praised for her hard work, and he was telling them to give her his greetings, but there's nothing more that we know about her except that she worked hard for the Lord. And
I think Mary was just a common.
It was, yeah.
Name, because even Salome was Mary Salome, midwife. She was Mary Salome, so she could have been Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, it was like one of those time periods where Mary was the common name, like how we got time periods now where certain names are common. Yeah. You could almost tell when somebody was born by the name they got. The period. And so you find that Mary was probably like that. The same way when we get to the Jameses and the Josephs and the Simons, there are lots of them too. So yes. Any questions at all or any of the stuff? Yes, Marilyn.
Now the name Marilyn is derived too from Mary.
I would think so. I would think so. I will most likely think so. But you're not a bitter person, so that's good.
I don't know if Marilyn heard
that. What did you say, Dorothy? I heard.
Did you hear that the name Mary means bitter?
Yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah.
Yes, and I just said to her,
he didn't include Marilyn in in it, though. He did not.
But that's why that's why I said to her that she's not a bitter person. So
right.
That's good.
Well, that must be the Lynn part then is added, so it makes it sweeter.
I got you right. Yeah. There you go.
You may have a point, Marilyn. You may have a point.
Rebellious.
Yes, that was one of the names that's given for her as well. Rebellious and beloved. was another one as
Yeah,
well.
Beloved,
Yeah.
right.
Beloved is another one, but normally the name is bitterness because it comes from that the word Mara, which means bitter.
Really?
So
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Alright.
All right, now before we go, just a housekeeping thing is I will send you all another revised schedule of the program. What has happened is that when, in my enthusiasm of drafting this up, I forgot a couple of things. That one, June 19th is a federal holiday, it's a holiday. And so it's Juneteenth. And so I will most likely want to, because I find my
That'll work.
holidays as sanctus because I don't get the other days I should get off really, and I try to make sure I take those off. So I'll be doing that. But then following the following Wednesday, I will be in Kentucky at General Convention, and did not remember that either. And that is the last Wednesday in the month of June. And I do not wish for Bible study to go into July. So we are going to end Bible study on June 12th. What will happen is that next week we will look at the Jameses and the Josephs. We'll try to look at both of them together. The following Wednesday, the 12th, we will look at the Simons. But we will not get to look at Philemon and Onesimus or Timothy and Titus. We can look at them in another time, in another forum. But we won't do those this time. So those two will be taken off, but we'll be able to cover the Marys, the Jameses, the Josephs, and the Simons, and we will stop at the Simons. So the last class for recess before the fall will be on June 12th. So I just wanted to share that with you, so that you can enjoy the summer and so forth. So. But I will send you the revised schedule when I'm sending out the next emailing to you all. Okay?
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
And one of the things I have to send to you all, which I have not sent, is that I'm going to send you all, but I'm waiting till the end of all the classes, and I'll send them out one time, all the handouts on each person. This Bible, I think I had sent a couple to you before, and I keep forgetting to send the rest to you all. But what I plan to do is, it makes no sense sending it now. I will send them all in one lump sum when we've completed everyone. So you at least have those to keep. It gives you a little slight bio on each person. Well, when it comes to the Marys, though, you're not going to see all the Marys there. The only two I could find was Mary Magdalene, that was in that Bible study, was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus. I couldn't even find Mary of Bethany, which I thought was strange, but I might look again and see if I could find her, if she may be somewhere else. But you will get all of them for all the weeks that we have covered. You'll get a handout, and also a tool that helps you to see the goods, the positives, and the negatives of each person. And the good thing about this study Bible, it helps us to live our life in such a way to follow the good points of these people. So you'll get those. Okay. Have a good evening, everyone. Pam, thank you. Oh no, Marilyn is hosting. Thank you, Marilyn, for hosting.
Marilyn's hosting. Look
Yeah.
at Slack though, Father. Chris sent you something.
Okay, I will certainly do that. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Pam.
Yep.
And so everyone, have a good evening. And those who are in town, Marilyn, you have safe travels this weekend.
Right.
Marilyn goes back up to Connecticut. So have safe travels.
Oh, not Marilyn. Okay.
Yeah, Marilyn Cyrus. The other Marilyn, you have safe travels back home from where you are next week. And yes, and the others, I expect you in church on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you can see us, yes.
All right.
Have a good night,
Bye.
everyone. Love to
Okay.
love to everyone.
Alright.
Love to
Bye.
everyone.
Everyone.
Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye bye.
All right,
Bye.
bye.
Love that. Okay, take care.